Welcome to XYPN Radio, where your host Alan Moore brings you into a community of fee-only financial planners who want to profitably and successfully serve Gen X and Gen Y clients. If you're ready to get the knowledge you need from leaders in your field, learn from forward-thinking advisors, and take action on your own goals, XYPN Radio is the show for you. Here's your host.
Hello and welcome to this episode of XYPN Radio. I'm your host Alan Moore, and today I'm excited to have XYPN member Bill Nelson, the founder of Pacesetter Planning, on the show. Bill has a really cool story about his path to starting his RIA. His career started at Price Waterhouse Cooper, where he learned a ton about compliance and the regulatory landscape. But his now wife getting a medical residency in another state forced him to switch gears, and he faced the tough decision between taking a job at a broker-dealer or just starting his own RIA, because he realized that doing real financial planning was his path. He ended up taking the job, but now says he wishes he had just jumped in. He freely admits on the podcast that he did not believe in the whole niche marketing idea and got started just working with friends and acquaintances. While he's glad he did so because he got a lot of great experience, he's also started to embrace the idea of having a niche and is refocusing his practice to working with engaged and newly married couples. He has a lot of great wisdom that he shares on this show for listeners. And for anyone who's trying to decide if you should make the leap to start a firm, I think his encouragement will be helpful. This month's episodes are brought to you by Right Capital. Right Capital provides innovative financial planning software that digitizes and redefines the financial planning experience. Right Capital was ranked as the highest user-rated financial planning software in the 2017 annual software survey conducted by T3, Tech Hub, and Inside Information, and was recently added as part of XYPN's technology package, making it free for XYPN members. Sign up for a demo today at rightcapital.com and mention the XYPN Radio podcast to be eligible for 10% off retail pricing. You can find any of the additional resources that we mentioned during the episode at xyplanningnetwork.com/106. Also, be sure to go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to join our private group just for XYPN Radio listeners. It's the community of advisors we've all been looking for that's there to provide support when we need it the most. Best of all, it's free. I encourage you to check it out. Again, that's xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP. Without further ado, here is my interview with Bill. Hey, Bill, welcome to the show, man. Thanks so much for being on.
Hi, Alan. It's great to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited. So for the listeners, Bill actually sent me a video of him nominating himself, I guess, to say it loosely, to be on the podcast. It was awesome. I loved it. It was such a good way to hear a little bit about your story and that sort of thing. So thanks for being proactive and reaching out. I encourage listeners, if they have a cool story to tell and or continue to tell the same story over and over to other planners that may be listeners of the show, let me know, because that's what we're here for. But I appreciate you being proactive and reaching out and let me know that again, sort of had a cool story to tell. So as usual, we'll sort of take a step back and talk through a little bit about your career. So I guess, how did you get into financial planning?
Yeah, that's a great question. I am not one who kind of knew this is what I wanted to do and where I wanted to be from day one. Went to school in Washington, D.C., studied economics and government there. Took one internship on Capitol Hill to make me realize that was not where I wanted to be for the rest of my life. I graduated and started off in the financial services industry, but more on the kind of corporate consulting world. Started off, spent the first several years of my career with Price Waterhouse Cooper's PwC down in the Washington, D.C. area, really doing a lot of financial strategy and compliance work within a bunch of different government programs. Really bounced around across a lot of different teams there. Eventually kind of found my home and for several years on a project where we had taken over really managing the operations and financial issues that came, that have to do with one of the SBA's small business loan portfolios. I don't know why I had a hard time coming up with that, but yes, so I was really fortunate, I think, to land on that team. It was a really great learning experience. The closest thing that I think you can be to a startup environment, working in a huge firm like PwC. And we were teamed with a large commercial bank as well to do that. It was a program we took over. The incumbent had been running it for 30 years, built all the technology and business processes for the program back in the 1980s, and really hadn't updated them since then, which was fun. It was the sort of role where I got brought in really just to be flat out manpower, but ultimately, really found a kind of niche. Oh God, we're getting to that word early today. And the person who almost was like the middle reliever of that team, to use a baseball analogy. That there'd be a problem that would pop up. I'd be the one who went through the government regulations and the contract and kind of figured out how we need to really structure this to move it forward. So that was really, I got a pretty strong background in compliance from that role, which has really obviously benefited me going forward now that I run a financial planning firm. It's interesting, when I kind of first went into this role, the two big things that, people would always ask me are, how are you going to get clients and how are you going to make sure you're compliant with this stuff? And the second piece was the easy part for me, which was great. And it really has like I said, my background is a little bit different, I think, than a lot of people in the industry, but it really has lent itself well to this sort of role. And ultimately, it's odd. I loved my experience at PwC, was completely happy there, but ended up in a situation where I was moving physically, moving, which really made me take a step back and figure out where to go from there.
Yeah, jobs like that fascinate me because one, I would have just been awful at that job. But two, these are the jobs that you don't even know exist, that like no one is out like, what I want to do for the rest of my life? Like do this compliance thing at, PwC. Like, no, that's just not it's not what's top of mind for people. And yet it's a critical thing that has to get done by somebody. And, you were on the team to do it, which I don't know why. It's just always so cool to me. Yeah. So was the move being necessitated for family reasons, or was there another job opportunity that was sort of calling to you?
Yeah. So there was most certainly not another job opportunity that was calling to me. I really loved that team, and it's sort of a weird parallel. We might never have been talking today if this move hadn't happened, and I'd still be working 80 hours a week and, craziness. I'm looking back. I'm glad I left when I did, but it was really brought on. My girlfriend at the time, now wife, was in med school, and she graduated med school and was doing residency. And for those who are familiar with that process, that there's not a lot of choice given always as to where you're going to end up. And, she's brilliant and matched at one of her top locations, but that was in Philadelphia. And I was still in the DC area at that time. And that was really what prompted the move.
Gotcha. Yeah. We have a lot of these conversations with various either team members of XYPN Network or advisors that say, ultimately the freedom to be able to move with your significant other, especially if you have one that's in a situation where they don't have the flexibility, it'd be great if she did, but residency, like I said, it's a sort of here's where you're going. Good luck. And you just got to pack up and move. And if you want to be able to move with that person, it's the cool thing about owning a financial planning practice, or at least if you're set up virtually and sort of have set that expectation with your clients that, you have the freedom to just sort of pack up and move. Whereas a lot of jobs don't provide that flexibility. And it sounds like your position did not lend itself, I guess, to virtual work. Like you needed to be in the office.
Not long term. So I had the opportunity to stay on that particular team virtually for a number of months. I had, was pretty trusted by the team at that point. We had worked together for a few years, but ultimately I think I was going to hit a wall eventually. So at that point I'm moving, and the question is, what do I do now? And I had a good friend of mine from high school who was with a broker dealer who I'm not going to name because I have a lot of good things to say about them, but just don't want to go there. Said, hey, you really should try this. I think you'd be good at it. I love it. I'm going to work here until they kick me out. Couldn't speak highly enough about it. And that was what really got me to looking into the financial planning world. The firm was a national firm. You've talked about it a lot on the podcast in the past. We're known for going out, knocking on doors to drum up business. And so I started going through the interview process with them and loved all the people I was meeting there, had a lot of good things to say about the firm as well. But ultimately, I don't know when in the process this hit me, but I kind of asked myself, it seems like the hard part of this job is getting clients, right? It was very clear to me this was a sales job from day one. I think some people can be caught off guard by that. I really wasn't. I knew what I was getting myself into. I just kind of, out of sheer boldness, stupidity, however you want to put it, really kind of asked myself, okay, well, if getting clients is the hard part, which it seems like it is, why not just try to do this on my own, right? Why do I need to work for a big firm? And that was when I just kind of typed something into the internet one day, and you all popped up, and I was really just completely enamored by this idea from day one. That whole week I would go to work, come home, and just put together a business plan and do all this research and figure out how I could possibly make this new firm work on my own. And this was back in April or so, 2015, a couple of years ago. And after a few days of kind of getting really excited about this, really kind of knew that this is what I was feeling I should do. My wife, actually at the time we were long distance. She went to school out of state. So I texted her. I said, hey, look, I know we've been talking about me going into this financial planning world. Here's a thought, right? What if I'm thinking about starting my own firm and doing it independently. And she texts me back and she says, okay, great. And just, it speaks to the mental state that I was in at that point in time, that I read that as, okay, great. And in reality, it was probably more, okay, great. I think I kind of caught her completely off guard. And let's just say I'm better at sales now than I was then. I didn't do a good job.
Hey, sounds like you did a great job.
Yeah. So I think that weekend we were up looking for apartments in Philly, and really I showed her the stuff I was doing in a little bit more of a compelling way. And she got immediately on board. She has been nothing but supportive and really pushing me to do this from day one, aside from that kind of catching off guard that one time. And she said, yeah, that might make sense. Maybe it would make sense. Because ultimately, I think looking back on it now, I was going into kind of a completely new industry, but I had a good plan. I was making a good salary. I was planning on staying at PwC for several more months and working remotely and spending my evenings getting this up and running, building my processes, doing the compliance stuff, taking some CFP classes and all that. And ultimately, I just got talked out of it. This was in April of 2015. I moved in June. And, in between those 2 months, I was still going through the interview process with the broker dealer, and, I was just asking a lot of people, friends in the DC area. And I guess if I had to summarize how those conversations went, it was, look, Bill, you have two ideas here, right? And one of them is a great one. You should absolutely go into financial planning. You'd be great at it. But what if instead of starting your own firm, you worked for a company that, I don't know, exists? Was kind of the tone of a lot of these conversations. And it was hard to argue with that, right? It made a lot of sense. I was brand new to this. I didn't know if I'd love it or not. I do, as it turns out. But ultimately I'm sort of, I feel like an anomaly in the sense that I knew the difference between fee-only planning and not fee-only planning. I knew the difference between the fiduciary and suitability standard going in. And I chose the other route in the name of stability. And I like the people there too, which certainly helped. And I just, looking back on it now, I see why I did the thing that I did. But ultimately, I wonder if I had my own XYPN financial planner that I was working with, if maybe they would have kicked me and told me to no, go do this on your own, just because it really was where my passion was at the time. And I think I did a really good job of kind of moving on once I went to the broker dealer world. But I was very hesitant about it. I think at first it didn't quite feel right when I did it. Not the least of which I'll add that my friend who talked me into it in the first place, who said that they were going to work there until the day they die, actually quit the same day I signed my offer letter. Funny how that works. And I was maybe a little bit exasperated at the time, but looking back on it, I also had my own sudden exit, which we'll get to. So, that's kind of the way, it wasn't a good omen, I guess. And like I said, I do think that once I jumped in and once I got started, I was all in. But, looking back on it, I just had such a good plan. I had such a good plan, and I wish that I had just tried it ultimately.
Okay, so this is April of 2015. This is really interesting. So when did you actually decide to sign up for the CFP coursework, I guess, and why did you go ahead and jump in on that?
That's a great question, Alan. And I didn't, and I still haven't.
Sorry, actually, I thought you had said that. I apologize. I misunderstood.
As part of the join XYPN right when I moved to Philadelphia and launch my firm very gradually as I stayed on with PwC for several more months. My plan was to get the CFP during that time, because I've done a lot of personal investing. I'm a finance guy. I'm a book learner, but I recognize that I need to actually know what I'm doing. Right. And so, that was kind of the plan, but ultimately instead I went to work for a firm that didn't encourage that.
Gotcha. Yeah. And that's a tough situation to be in, especially whenever you're first you're new to the industry, just sort of learning everything there is. And it's like, if your firm isn't supporting it, well, does that really mean it's important, or is it worth spending the kind of money? Because getting the CFP is not cheap, because you got to go through all of the education and that sort of thing. But, sometimes we say bad experience is better than no experience, and sometimes no experience is is better than a bad experience. It just sort of depends. And I always battle this, because I hate to tell folks, I want any college student, if you were 22 years old, to hear me say starting a business without any experience at 22 is a bad call for the vast majority of people. But when you're a career changer and you have a solid income, or a spouse with income, and you have work history and life experience, and you're learning the industry and that sort of thing, it's tougher for me to I can't just give that blanket recommendation of like, go get some experience, go get your 3 to 5 years, because that may not be, what's in your best interest. It just sort of depends.
Yeah, so I completely, as somebody who thought about doing this, without any experience in the industry, I could not have done this without the work experience that I had, right? Like I said, I felt very comfortable with the idea of running a firm in a highly regulated industry because of my compliance background, right? I then needed to learn how to do financial planning, right? Which is the second piece. And I'll say, we'll get to my transition, but I didn't leave myself with a ton of runway once I ended up leaving and doing this on my own, toward the end of last year. And so, to me, getting the CFP at that point, I've heard kind of two messages on this podcast, right? I've heard, on one hand, it's the gold standard. You got to do it. Everybody should do it. But I've also heard it doesn't teach you how to work with young people, right? And so my perspective is, I have then had some time working in the investment world and doing basic retirement and college planning and things like that. Nothing as comprehensive as what I'm doing today, but I knew a little bit about how that stuff worked. I got some CFP textbooks. I'm a book learner. I'm a book nerd. I'm the sort of person that just, you tell me to learn something, I'm not going to search on the internet for it. I'll pick up a book on it. So I got the CFP textbooks and have worked through those. And I'm holding it up now. We're not on camera, obviously. And I went and took Heather Jarvis's student loan course. And I pursued the education that I knew I needed. But, ultimately, to me, having the CFP is something that's going to be important to me long term. And I am in the process of getting started with that now. But instead, I chose to get up and running and take it all in like a sponge, right? I spend probably, 4 to 5 hours every week learning, studying, getting caught up on what's going on in the industry. And that's the sort of stuff you have to do, in my opinion. That this isn't, even though I am saying, I wanted to go out and do this, you need to have a plan, and you need to know it's not going to be easy. And if you're willing to put in the legwork, it's awesome, is what I have to say about it. I definitely couldn't have done it right out of college, but having the few years of work experience at a great, very demanding firm, I feel completely prepared to do that.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And you bring up a great point about the CFP, because this is one of those things where I don't want to give the implication that we're saying, like, if you will not be successful if you don't have the CFP. I don't think that's true. I certainly think it helps. And it helps in two ways. I mean, it helps from just a pure education standpoint in just learning the basics of financial planning. And then, to your point, the CFP board does not teach you I would say, the two most critical things as an XY Planning Network member. One is the actual nuts and bolts of planning for younger people. The CFP is very retirement centric, and generally the CFP board, the CFP education is really focused on helping people that are financially healthy. There's not a lot of behavioral finance and communication and that sort of thing in terms of working with people that aren't financially healthy yet, which I've started to realize is the major distinction between working with younger people and older, wealthier folks, is that we actually get the opportunity to help them lay the foundation for their financial life. Whereas with an older client, you may just be helping them repaint the walls, if we're using a house remodel metaphor. Now, that being said, it doesn't make the CFP bad. It just doesn't make it ideal. I've never heard of anyone that went the route you did, which I think is really fascinating and makes a lot of sense. And that's go directly to Heather Jarvis, or, Joe Messinger's got his college planning course, or, there are a few things out there like that to go focus on the actual content side instead of, just looking, just sort of get that base education you're going to be using.
Yeah. And just to be clear, I am certainly pro CFP as well. But I will say that the number one thing that I have done that, as far as the kind of learning that I've put myself through, that has made me feel like I do a great job for my clients today is just soaking up everything that like Carl Richards puts out. And I do soak up everything that Carl Richards puts out about how to actually deliver change to clients. You need to know what you're doing, certainly. And, I've spent a lot of time doing that, but just, I can't speak. I feel like about Carl Richards, like a lot of people feel about like Taylor Swift or other celebrities. Like I would,
I feel the same way, so I understand.
I would freak out. But yeah, that's sort of my perspective on it. Certainly it's knowing, learning is important, and you need to be able to effectively deliver that to clients. Couldn't agree more.
Well, I'm trying to think what we can call him. Carl Swifty or T Richards. I don't know. T Swizzle. So I don't know. We'll have to come up with something for him. The Taylor Swift, that we need to make a tagline like Carl Richards, the Taylor Swift of financial planning.
Oh, but he's so much better than Taylor Swift, though. I don't know what the right person is.
Oh, you're going to get so much hate mail. We're going to get 1 million downloads because someone insulted Taylor Swift.
That's fine. I would gladly bear that burden.
So since we're on the topic, what other resources, because you said you haven't quite started the CFP program yet, but you're about a year in. So what other, I guess, educational resources do you rely on besides just Carl Richards?
Oh man. Yeah, that's a great question. A little bit of everything. I've signed up for industry publications. Like I said, I actually have some textbooks that I've acquired a lot of my technical knowledge from. I mean, Michael Kitces, I don't succeed in keeping up with everything that he puts out because I don't know how anybody can.
Yep, I understand. I know where to look if I have a question.
Kind of an interesting footnote on all this. The project that I was on, my last project at PwC that I left was actually in the town that his financial planning firm is in. And I didn't realize that until later on, which is interesting. Funny how worlds collide sometimes.
So any other, I guess, educational resources you recommend for folks?
Oh, I mean, I could probably come up with some. I could probably come up with a good list.
Just curious. It's just interesting to see where folks follow, what resources folks follow.
Yeah. And and even, I'd say even if you have the CFP or some of these other designations, you got to keep up with what's going on in the world. It's very easy to be on an island when you're working for yourself, and you just can't do that. You just can't.
So taking one step back, I guess, or a couple steps back maybe. So you said we're back to April 2015. You decide, hey, I think I could start my own firm, but you sort of get talked out of it and go work for the broker-dealer. So you said you had a bit of a quick exit. So I guess what was life like there, and sort of why are you not still there, sort of 2 years in?
Great question. I moved right to Philadelphia, started at a brand new firm that, like I said, is known for drawing up business, knocking on doors. And I don't know how much you know about the city of Philadelphia, Alan.
Minimal, just having been to conferences there, but that's about it.
Yeah, we are not known as a city for being super friendly, patient, any of those things, right? So it is not, it is not the sort of environment that I had a ton of luck knocking on somebody's door and having them answer in a way that was pleasant. But I did. I certainly did it. And ultimately, the sort of unique challenge that I was in is, just put yourself in my shoes for a minute, right? Brand new city, don't know where anything is. I had never even been to Philadelphia outside of like one little thing. I played the sax and I played a women's Sweet 16 basketball game in the pep band for my college. That was the only time I had been to Philadelphia over the age of 18. The question is, okay, great. Go knock on doors to drum up business. Where do you go? Like, I think if I was to ask you that where you live now, you could probably tell me some of the neighborhoods that might lend itself well to that. I had no flipping clue. And so my initial reaction is, okay, why don't I go to the neighborhoods that I know are wealthy, right? And so I went into the section right outside the city that's known for having a lot of old money. Mansions, big stone houses, and just, what I know now is that a lot of the accounts for these families are now managed by the grandchildren of the financial planners who managed them for the grandparents back in the 20s, and it's sort of passed down. It was not a great strategy on my part, but I kid you not, the first door I knocked on, right? The very first day, brand new, walking up this, picked a road on the map, went there, and not only was the person's name on the mailbox outside, but the name of the house was carved into the iron gates at the foot of the driveway. It was that sort of environment. And I said, okay, do I do this or do I not? And I did it. And, it didn't go particularly well, but, but I learned a little bit more as I went on, and, certainly opened up. I was doing a good job opening up accounts, certainly had some wealthier clients, but For the most part, the people who were coming to me with questions that I was opening up a Roth IRA or whatever it was for people who were within 5 or so years of my age. That was fine. I was able to work with them. It wasn't, terribly financially lucrative, but did it. And I kept going up until it was probably around this time last year. We're recording in June. I don't know when this will air. I guess to take a step back for a minute. So I have been working with a business coach who I credit with being here today, frankly. Can't speak highly enough about that. We can get into that a little bit more. Since 2015, it was more of a life coach sort of arrangement at that point in time. It became a business coach deal all throughout, right? Encouraged me to make this transition. Was working with him through here. And it was a day in sometime June, July. I don't remember when it was, but I had finally gotten an appointment with a prospect who I met my second day of knocking on doors. It was the person who kind of convinced me that, yeah, actually, maybe this will work after all. Right. Tried for 9-10 months to get an appointment with him. Finally got a meeting with this guy and parked the car. I was about ready to go in and I opened my phone and it's a message from my business coach. And he was, we do a lot of kind of monthly goal setting. And my goal was to go knock on 1 million doors that month or whatever it was. And he just said, Bill, how much easier would your life be if rather than knocking on 1 million doors this month, you put a lead magnet up on your website and had 5 or 10 people coming to you every month? Send me your website and let's take a look. And so I sent him my website, right, which I had no control over, of course. And my response to him was, what was a lead magnet? Because I had no clue. And it was just like the walls just fell. That day. It was just, I kind of immediately got opened back up to, I'm killing myself working hard, working crazy hours. Wasn't doing particularly well. And in fact, I had some concerns. I got married in September of last year and I had a lot of concerns about the way that they evaluated people. I wasn't sure if I could take off as much time as I was looking to take off around my wedding. And just, kind of that message just kind of set it all off. And I was out of the firm probably within 3 weeks.
Oh, wow. So once that ball got rolling, it was hard to stop.
Yeah, it was just immediate. And like I said, there was some other stuff that was going on as well. Because like I said, a lot of the people who I was working with were younger and the firm just wasn't built to work with those necessarily.
Yeah. And the truth is, not to lump all broker dealers together because there are some exceptions to the general rule, but for the most part, they're not built to work with younger clients. Even if you're selling on a 5 or 6%, front end load on, A shares, if you're transacting $5, $10, $50,000 at a time, it just doesn't add up very fast. And it's just a high number of clients that you have to work with.
Absolutely. And, I really don't have, I had a pretty good experience there overall. I'm not I don't have the horror stories that I've heard from other folks from other firms in the industry. I think that they generally do a good job for their clients. And I'm very proud of everything I did there. There's nothing I look back on and say that, oh man, I sold this variable, universal, and whatever, and I really regret it. I didn't do that because it wasn't what I believed, and I think I did a good job sticking to my value set there, but it didn't work out very well. Not much more to say about it.
So, all right. So you had a 3-week transition, and I guess I'm assuming this whole time, the idea of starting your own firm was still sort of top of mind and something you had been thinking about.
So starting my own firm was not top of mind while I was employed by this broker dealer. I did a good job. I bought into the vision. I was all in, right? But as soon as that message came through and as I was starting to look at my numbers, I was all out again. And, once again, I immediately went back, found you guys. The podcast wasn't around, right? When I had first looked into joining you all in early 2015, it was now, started listening to those, went back to the drawing board. And, the really good part of the plan that I had initially was that I had a long runway, right? I was employed. I was going to stay employed until I was ready to launch. And I didn't feel comfortable doing that here. I really wanted to leave the firm I was with the right way. And I didn't think the right way was, planning to launch this business on the side. I wanted to get out. And so I took your advice, Alan, and I got a nice side hustle for myself. And basically, as soon as I had that done, I was out.
So I have to ask, what was the side hustle then that you were able to create for yourself?
Yeah, so I way back in the day, I had entertained the idea of going to grad school. So I took the GRE exam, never went to grad school. So it had been kind of a waste. until now. And so I got a job with a major test prep company and I teach, and I still am doing this part-time to this day, teach SAT and GRE prep classes a couple times a week. It's worked out very well. I love doing it. Even now, as my business has ramped up significantly, I like doing it. It's a fun way to get up and practice speaking in front of people and use it, just kind of focus your attention on other things. And it's been great. Can't speak highly enough of it.
Yeah, I am so glad that I never have to take the GRE again. I took it once and I will never have to do it again. I'll never forget, and I don't know if they still do it this way, and if they do, how you possibly prepare for it, but how we had to write essays in basically Notepad where it had no grammar or spell check. And I'm pretty sure they thought I was dumb. I mean, just like straight, I cannot believe they let me into grad school because I think out of 5, I got like a 2 on the writing portion. Thankfully, my math and English scores were high enough to convince them I wasn't just totally dense, but like it was hard. So totally random, but very cool that you are doing that. So is that more of like a contract position, or work when you want to work, or is it pretty steady work and revenue that's coming in?
Yeah, it's been fairly steady. It definitely is. Here are the classes we have available. Which ones do you want to do? There have been some months when I'm not doing any. There have been some months when I've probably been doing too many at once. It's been fairly variable, but it's worked out. It's worked out really well getting started. And like I said, I like doing it. I am very intentionally keeping as much money in the business as I can. I am married as well, right? So there's a second income coming in, and so I don't have any grand desire to leave there as well. I will leave there when I feel like I need to, which is great. And I'm very fortunate to have that, because there are arguably a lot of benefits for me having the experience working at the broker-dealer before I transitioned, but the personal finance piece was not one of them. That was where my plan was great before, and I just kind of fell into the situation now and have made it work, which is great. And I have no doubt that this is gonna work going forward at this point. But the transition and getting married in the meantime was hard. Certainly. I'm not I call myself the worst millennial. I know nothing about, like, Taylor Swift is basically the reason that name came out is that's one of the few pop singers I know. I really, have put a ton of time into learning the technology stack and all that stuff. I lived with a full-time, basically tech support agent all through college and a few years after, who helped me out with all that stuff, but I don't live with him anymore. So I had to hit the ground right. He works for Google, by the way, but he hates when I call him a tech support agent. So that's where that's coming from. Hi, Brian. How are you? But anyway, yeah. So I really, I left, and I was trying to get up and running as quickly as possible was the challenge. And I had the side job with that paid the bills on an ongoing basis, but I didn't want to delay, right? I had to get up and running as quickly as possible, to the point where I will never forget it, right? I sent in my ADV to the state for approval the week before my wedding, expecting that, I'd be on a honeymoon and they'd be looking at it and no time would be lost. And I got an email response the day before my wedding, and I'm sitting at brunch with our families doing last minute prep stuff, like responding to the state regulators. So, I don't recommend quitting your job, starting a company, and getting married all in the same month. I've done some right things and some wrong things along the path. That was not the right thing to do.
It is funny, it's the whole things come in threes, and once one piece happens, you tend to just sort of stack them up. But it's nice, you get all the stress done in a couple of week period, instead of being sort of stressed for a long time. You're just really stressed for a short amount of time. But so, yeah, what was the process like for you sort of getting started? And I guess, well, first, how long did it actually take you from sort of deciding, or maybe it was joining XY Planning Network and saying, okay, I'm going to do this, to when the actual registration went through?
So my state was very quick. My state is the quickest that I've heard from basically anybody, like to the point where I had an email with questions waiting for me when I got back from the honeymoon. And it took me about a week to get all that stuff together. And I was multitasking throughout all that. Sent it in, and I heard back within the next day with an approval. So that piece was really faster than I had counted on. I didn't have everything else ready. The website wasn't done and all that. And so I got married mid-September. I launched the first week in November of 2016. Right. So it took me probably 2.5 to 3 months to get everything up and running. Because I didn't start any of this until I left.
Yeah, and I think 2 to 3 months is quick but doable. I normally say like give it 3 to 4 months just to be safe.
You absolutely should, because it was I had a lot of luck kind of break in my favor during that time, and I worked like crazy to make that happen in that amount of time.
To get it done that fast. Yeah, and we'll have folks that for whatever reason have a situation that necessitates them leaving their firm quickly, or broker dealer's whoever's gonna call your clients and tell them you're leaving and try to win that business back or whatever. And so it's like, okay, got to get started tomorrow. But the one variable we cannot control is just how long the state takes to review it. I had a similar experience in Wisconsin. I think I submitted on Monday and was approved on Friday. I know they didn't read my documents because they told me that, basically, where they just said like, hey, we're going to review all this in 6 months. See you then when we come to your office. So I got audited 6 months in, which I'm not sure if they have warned you that they'll do a quick audit or not, but it can be different. Some states take, 12 weeks to review. We've had registrations get stuck for a while because of something. You just never really know. And now you reminded me right before we were jumping on that, whenever you went to go start your firm, again, bad things tend to come in threes, which I guess the time before that was all good things. But maybe what I should say is what can go wrong will go wrong. So what happened just before you were going to launch your firm?
Yeah. So Sunday night, I was going to launch my firm Monday morning. I had a press release and intro blog article and all the stuff you do the first day in business. And I said, I'm going to go for a run and clear my head and come back and proofread it all. And I managed to break my foot going for said run. I was a block away from an urgent care place, literally hopped in and, broke my foot, and I was non-weight bearing for over 3 weeks, which was exactly what you want to have happen right before you're going to do something like this.
Yet tied to your desk for the next 3 weeks. That seems like a brilliant way to force yourself to actually work.
Yes and no. I have had the perspective that I wanted to get this up and running as quickly as possible, which meant that I was going to be trying to pound the literal pavement, not the proverbial pavement, to, around town to try to get, networking and, really true prospecting for clients in a way that you don't hear about a lot within XYPN. Like I felt like I had to do that. And that really, I did some of that from my desk. I did a little bit of, cold emailing and things like that had a little bit of an effect, but it really kind of set my marketing plan back a little bit. And in ways that I feel like I'm even just now starting to unlearn some of the habits that I formed back then.
So as you were getting started, did you have a sort of target market ideal client in mind, or were you sort of thinking to go general until you learned who you enjoyed working with and who you didn't?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked me that, Alan. I'm so glad. So I am one of, there are, from what I understand, there are two types of people who listen to this podcast, right? There are people who are all in on niche marketing, and there are people who fight you tooth and nail on it. I was one of those people. I wanted to work with younger folks, right? So, Gen Y, millennials, young professionals, whatever you want to call them. That was who I wanted to work with. I really hesitated or really didn't want to make it more narrow than that. And the reason why, there are two reasons why, actually, is when I hear, or more accurately, when I thought about being the person who only works with eighth year law associates or senior associates at PwC or any of the other big four firms, I wanted to have a bigger impact than that. That was too narrow of a vision for where I want to be 10 years from now. And then the other reason is more to the point I just made, is that I wanted to hit the ground running. And I didn't want to do a lot of this long-term, or rely on this long-term blogging, things like that, right? I wanted to go out and get clients this month. And, we obviously I want to get to the point where I'm relying on clients finding me, but, like I said, I had a great plan in 2015 that would have given me a long runway to start the firm. I didn't have that this time around. I really wanted to hit the ground hard and do everything I could to just get myself in front of everybody I could.
So because the runway you're referring to, you mentioned earlier, was very dependent upon having a salary while you kind of got ramped up and that sort of thing. Whereas obviously you found a side hustle, so you had some level of income, but did not have, probably not quite the same salary as you were making when you were working at PwC.
Correct. We had savings to rely on. We haven't really needed to do that, which is awesome, but that was my fear, right? I'm a big, Nick Murray Game of Numbers fan. And one of the big takeaways or quotes that I got from that book, other than just you always need to prospect for clients, is that, there is no way that you can possibly fail in this, right? There are 100 or 125 or however many clients it is out there who want to work with you, right? The only way you can fail is if you stop looking for them. And the addendum that I have to that is, or if you need to go get a job, right? That's my corollary to that. But that was really, yeah. So that really kind of led my, a lot of my desire to keep it fairly general going forward. And, like we've talked about, my plan was changed a little bit. I had a pretty aggressive in-person networking plan, but just because I didn't feel like hiking around town on crutches all the time. And it was my driving foot, so I couldn't drive either. The interesting thing that happened though is that, I didn't just say I was going to work with everybody, right? I said I was going to work with people in my generation. And what I found is that I got a lot of referrals from friends and a lot of kind of business from, I've never once tried to pitch a friend on anything. I don't do that. Even at my old firm, I was not one to call up friends to try to get them to buy something. But I did have a lot of people come to me. And in fact, what I was told is that, back when I was with the broker dealers, you needed to talk to 125 people in order to get one client. But what I found is that if you kind of add up all of my LinkedIn connections and Facebook friends and things like that, and I put all this stuff out there, that aggregate number divided by 125 is about how many people came forward to me immediately. And like I said, I got some referrals from some closer friends as well. And if I had pigeonholed myself right off the bat, I'm telling you right now, I would not have chosen the niche I have since chosen, which we'll get there. And I think I would have cut myself off from working with some phenomenal people who I would do anything for these days. Is kind of my first wave of clients right off the bat. And I think that I have become a big advocate for niche marketing. I think that the second I got narrower, my focus for how to proceed got a lot clearer. But I'm so glad I didn't do that right off the bat. And so I guess I would say that, for people who are thinking about starting this and want to be general at first, my perspective, not this, the opinions expressed herein do not accurately reflect the opinions of the XY Planning Network, is to start general, but put a pin in your calendar 3 months from now. And just take a step back and see where you're at and see where your clients are coming from and see who's coming to you and who you really want to work with from that pool. Because what I found is that the people who I liked working with the most and the people who converted for me the highest were people who were either living together, not engaged, or married within a year. Those are my favorite clients to work with. So I have since, and I'm really just now in the process of rebranding my firm around engaged and newlywed couples.
This is something that I struggle because sometimes I know I come across on this show and just in conversation where I'm saying like everyone must have a niche and it's the only way to go. And I can't understand life without a niche, which is just, it's not true simply because I started my firm without a niche too. My About Me page was, that I serve individuals and families, which, is pretty much everyone. So there are very few folks that fall outside that definition. So I totally get it. And I remember when I worked at Rick Kaler's firm back in South Dakota, we would work with anybody that, that was a good cultural fit, but met an asset minimum. And we had talked extensively about having a niche. And I remember Rick saying, Alan, if we don't work with these clients, we don't have anywhere to refer them to. And, we're in this business to help people. And so, and I get it that we all sort of got into this business because we want to help and have a big impact. And until we have enough people, and we're now, I think, at this tipping point where we have enough people that have gone into niches that we can start referring each other. I believe it was Dave Grant wrote an article several years ago, and I think it was like "Go Big." I'll have to go find the article, or "Go Small to Go Big," or "Think Small to Go Big," or something like that. And it was tied in with some of the work Kristen Herod has done, a marketing coach around niche marketing, and it was all around this concept of eventually this world of many, many, many niche market firms that are referring each other so that we don't feel like we're not serving everyone because we're able to get them with the best advisor for them instead of feeling like we have to work with everybody because we're the only one that will work with them. Sometimes we have to act the way that we want the world to be, even if it's not there yet. But it is an interesting transition, and it's something that we're certainly dealing with. So, but it is really cool to hear that, that you've actually made that switch into having a niche, which some people do and some people don't if they start sort of more general. So what is that transition going to look like for you? I mean, are you going to, let go of any retainer clients that don't meet that niche, or are you just sort of going to rebrand going forward? I guess, and is that going to change your service model or fee structure at all?
Oh, that's a great question. I don't even know where to begin, right? So I guess I would have to start with bringing back in the business coach I've been working with here, and that's something that, we've kind of put off to the side, but working with him has given me he's outside of the industry, which is really interesting. I think it's created some challenges certainly along the way. He's big on, putting client testimonials on your website. And I say, I can't do that. Right. Things like that. But it's given me a lot of really, really just kind of outside the box ideas. And what I found, and I had kind of a call, his group structure is it's a coached mastermind group, right? So there's a good number of us. We're all on calls together. And I was kind of in the quote unquote hot seat one night in April, and kind of talking through some of the challenges that I've had. And, he suggested, putting together something that looks like kind of a marriage guide, right? For couples who fight about money and things like that. And I don't even remember that happening on this call. I'm just I was so wrapped up in the prospecting sort of mindset, but it was in the recap notes. And I've had a couple conversations with a wonderful member of his team a few times about it since. And everybody on the call apparently really resonated with people, like, people who were divorced and said, oh, that totally would have helped. You should have done that. I'm sorry. They wish that they had something like that. So I have really taken a step back. I'm seeing both in the conversations that I'm having with my clients who are couples, some trends, even kind of beyond that, right? I'm taking a step back, and I feel like I have my finger on a framework that I'm hoping is really going to help couples manage their money better. This is something that is literally, I feel like I'm in the eye of a hurricane right now, right? And that, like, the past, year has been kind of raging through, fighting my way through, just all the things that happen when you start a business. And I'm just kind of in the middle right now. And I have this vision that I'm working to execute. And I'm talking with marriage counselors and things like that to vet some of these things. And I'm creating this program that I couldn't be more excited about. I think is going to be really powerful. Probably going to turn into I don't know if it's going to be like a long book, but a book of some kind down the road. And you're just really kind of a really methodical framework to kind of help people get on the same page. Because what I'm finding is that, there are sort of money habits that we have, how we manage our finances day to day. And there are money values, right? What's important to you and how you manage your money. And what I'm finding is that a lot of couples are on the same page for one of them, but not the other. And it's just a matter of finding ways to show that and to make that more seamless to help people going forward. It is really, none of that has to do with investments, right? Or none of that has to do with even retirement planning. And I couldn't be more, like, I've been obsessing over this for the past couple of weeks, and I'm hoping to roll it out in August.
So tell me about the program. Is it a course? Is it a guide that you'll walk folks through on just an individual couple basis, or will this be a group model? Like, tell me about the program and sort of the structure you're envisioning for it.
Yeah. So it's going to, I am a big lean startup fan, Alan, as I know you are as well. It is going to be a sort of minimum viable product going forward. The coach I work with, his name is Julian Gordon. I feel like I should add that. Jullien Gordon. Masterminds.org is his website. He's really shifted into creating kind of group mastermind type programs, which is not the way I want my firm to go. But, so right now what I'm doing is I am creating this kind of diagnostic tool. I'm vetting it with people in related industries. And Julian's methodology is, set your goals a month at a time. Before you even begin working on them, do something that's going to force you to do it, essentially. Right. So if you want to write a book, schedule a meeting with an editor a month out. Right. So you have to do it. And so I have an email drafted to a lot of engaged, newly married couples that I am going to be sending out to, schedule a kind of walkthrough of this tool, and with some ways to collect anonymous feedback from people to really test it and get people's feedback on it. that I'm going to be looking to do at the end of July.
Very cool. That's great advice for folks that are, if you ever struggle to get started on things, that is great advice on how to get started. It's just sort of force it on yourself.
Yeah. He has a book is called Guaranteed Goals. It's on Amazon. Short read. You could read it in a couple hours. Really walks you through a nice framework for how to do that. I can't speak highly enough of how he shifted my mindset on a lot of things. Like I said, I think there's certainly some challenges in working with a coach outside the industry. It's been a great experience overall. And so ultimately, I have a lot of goals for how I want or vision for where I want my firm to be in 6 months by the end of 2017. None of them have to do with revenue or number of clients. I think that this vision I have is, I'm so excited about it, and I want to get it right and share it with everybody else. It very well could turn into a course someday, Alan, to answer the original question. For now, it's just going to be, it's going to be a PDF kind of walkthrough on my site as a way to collect email addresses from people. It's going to be, I really have to do with the framework of how I walk through this with clients. I'm not going to get rid of any of the clients I have that are outside that niche. One thing that I didn't fully appreciate before I launched my own firm is just how attached you get to those first few people that work with you, right? There is not a mountain I wouldn't move for the clients that I have now. But ultimately, the firm is profitable now, which is great. And so, that the real hustle that I had at the beginning to get up and running is behind me a little bit. And so now I have a very clear vision for how I want the next six months to go. And I think it's going to be great long term.
Cool. So I guess, where are things at with your business now? So, how many clients do you have either on retainer or have you worked with on a project basis? Sort of 7 months in to the business. So I guess, where do things sort of stand for the company?
Yeah. So I've been adding 1 to 2 subscription. We don't use the R word at Pacesetter Planning, Alan, for compliance reasons. Yeah, I've been adding 1 to 2 clients a month. I do investment management as well. I tend to gravitate toward the investment management side, I think, more than some of the other folks in XYPN do. Have been growing pretty well. Have dabbled in a lot of, I wish I could kind of say the one thing that's been working for me marketing wise. I've been trying out so many things here and there that I don't feel like I have a great answer for that. But, I'm past the point where, there's no question this is going to work at this point. Now it's just a matter of really switching gears and really going more into the kind of long-term niche marketing space that I fought against for so long. And I'm glad I did in the first few months, but ultimately, the second I kind of really committed myself to that, my perspective shifted, which was great.
Very cool. So your current model, if I remember correctly, is sort of doing an upfront fee for financial planning, ongoing subscription fee, and then you also do investment management as sort of an add-on AUM service. Is that correct?
I guess. I've iterated this a few times. I have a number of clients who have done a good job saving and are working with me purely on an investment management basis as well.
Gotcha. So this was something I really struggled with, because when I started my firm, I was doing financial planning on an hourly basis and then investment management on an AUM basis. And I had some AUM only clients, and I always struggled with drawing lines around what was financial planning and what was an investment management. Because I'm in an investment management meeting and they say something about, like, should they be putting money into a 529 plan? I'm not going to cut on my $200 an hour time clock, answer the question, then cut it off and go back to investment management. So have you struggled with that as well? Or have you found a good way of managing sort of doing investment management and not crossing the line without, I guess, working for free on the financial planning side? Any thoughts there?
Oh man, I don't know. I've done a pretty good job of that. I would say that's why I don't work hourly. I can't even wrap my brain around how that would work. But ultimately, no. I think I don't require clients to have all their financial accounts with me. That's not something that I offer. I think if they, what has been more common is that if clients don't want to pay the monthly subscription fee and they have, some brokerage accounts or things like that and want investment management help, I've more often dropped the monthly subscription fee for that. That's been more common. I don't know if that answers your question. I'm having a hard time thinking through that.
Understood. No, it's something that I struggled with and don't have a good answer for either on how to handle it, other than to say, the way I handled it was just to not take those clients on anymore. Was I just said, no more investment only clients. If you want investment management, you're getting financial planning. And I moved away from hourly and into retainer and just said, if you want investment management, you have to do financial planning. I'm not an investment only guy. And so that was my way of handling it. I don't know if that, I wish there was a better way, because I do think there are a lot of clients out there, like you said, that, there's a personality and an expertise from a client perspective. They may not necessarily need ongoing financial planning. That, this is something they can do on their own if they have the time and are willing to dive into it and that sort of thing, and sort of use you as an occasional guide instead of, the more comprehensive service. I don't believe that everyone needs an ongoing subscription-based financial planner. I don't think that's necessarily true. So any plans or any tweaks that you plan to make with the service model or the fee structure as you're adopting and sort of focusing on the new niche, or will it just be sort of a new service offering that gets added to the current plan? I guess any changes planned there?
Yeah, probably. I think that at the very least, the meeting structures that I have, especially the first few meetings, are going to be much more geared toward, making sure that we have the same vision, and to make sure that there's nothing we need to address in the intermediate term. Because I've found that to be the case sometimes where we do need to address those things first and foremost. So I think that process will come much more in line with this framework that I have kind of outlined, but certainly isn't finalized yet. I would be surprised if my business looks exactly like it does today 6 months from now.
Yep. If it does, I would be shocked as well. And I think that's actually something that newer advisors need to hear. Sometimes we struggle with perfectionism and really wanting to get everything perfect in the way in the way it's going to be. And you just realize there's no way to know until you roll it out and you try to sell it a few times and you start to iterate and you change things and you find a new niche market and all this. Like, you have to be comfortable with change and embrace change if you want to be a successful entrepreneur. Because if your business looks the same in 6 months as it does today, it's possible that you're not iterating in the way that you need to be, and your business may actually end up going backwards because of it. I don't think there's ever a secret formula and once you find it, you've mastered it, that it never improves. I think we're always improving as entrepreneurs.
Yep, absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
So this is going to be a huge shift for you, obviously, with sort of shifting into the niche and that sort of thing. Any other big changes or things on the horizon that you're sort of iterating on at this point?
Oh man, no. I think that that really is the biggest piece. Is that I feel like I finally have my finger on something that I've noticed and I haven't had a name for. That is still, it's a really interesting time to do this podcast interview. I'd be curious to listen back to this a year from now. And, hopefully it's going to kind of progress as I think it's going to. I mentioned before that like Carl Richards is my icon, right? And I guess like I would never compare myself in magnitude to Carl. I will never be as successful as he is, right? But his kind of behavior gap book, right, is sort of that he was the financial planner and then had this on the side, right, as the sort of methodology and framework that he walks consumers through. That sort of like, that is where I want to go, right? So I have my financial planning firm that has this sort of bigger piece associated with it. And it's just a matter of getting that right first and foremost.
Yeah, testing some more. Like I said, Lean Startup. If for any listener that hasn't read that book, you have to go pick it up because it really is a great way of framing that you don't have to, you don't launch the final product, right? You launch this MVP, minimum viable product. It's what's just barely good enough for people to buy or at least talk to you about and see, did you get it right? You may find this needs to be a course. You could find that this needs to be a group, sort of a group coaching program, or maybe this is just tied in with a financial planning program, or maybe this is just the best lead magnet possible. Like, I don't know. And you won't know until you sort of put it out there and test and you make your best guess, but you just won't know until you're there.
Absolutely. And I'll say, that I think it would be very easy for me to come on this podcast right now and not talk about any of this. Right. But because if I've learned anything from running this business is that you have so many ideas and it's just so hard to make them all happen. Right. I really want this to happen, which is why I'm trying to commit myself publicly to make it happen. Right. And it might not work. I might be completely misguided and I might completely go in a new direction in 3 months. But, that's the idea of building that minimum viable product. Right. Is you have your framework. I'm running it by some experts and eventually, people in my target demographic that I'm not going to try to sell it to. I'm just going to ask for feedback from there, we'll see how it goes.
Fantastic. Well, I can't wait to hear. And like I said, there's no better way to get sort of pushed into your goals than to announce it publicly. I will never forget in episode 1 of XYPN Radio, you can go all the way back. And that's when we initially started probing Michael Kitces to launch his podcast. And then he did, I guess, right around a year later. I think it took about a year to get it off the ground, just because it is quite a feat to get a podcast going sometimes. And he is slightly busy. Yeah, publicly said it. And then he got emails really for the next year. He was getting pretty regular emails from listeners saying, hey, when's that podcast coming? We heard about it, because everyone goes back to the beginning and listens to episode 1. So pretty much every listener has heard him, make that commitment. So you may also get a lot of emails from listeners.
And if my answer on August 1st is that I have done nothing with this, then that'll be a problem, right? But my answer is going to be either I've tried this and I think it's really going to work, or I tried it and, we'll try something different. But ultimately, you gotta get in the arena. You gotta do it.
Awesome, Bill. Well, just sort of in closing, ask you the final question. If there's one piece of advice that you wish you could go back and give, either the Bill that was thinking about starting a firm and ended up going to the broker dealer, or back just a year or a little less than a year ago in making the decision to actually launch your own firm, there's one piece of advice you wish you could go back and give that Bill, that, what would that piece of advice be?
That's a great question, Alan. And I apologize. I just looked at the time, and my sort of life motto is, why say it in 4 words when you can say it in 40? So I'm sorry I've run my mouth so long.
You and Kitces both. I love it.
Yeah. So, I think just do it. Just, I'm probably not giving myself enough credit for how, instrumental my experience working for a broker was to get here. But, I don't feel like I left that situation any more knowledgeable, and ready to run a planning firm, other than learning how to deal with rejection, which I certainly did going door to door. But I'm much more passionate about what I'm doing now coming out of that experience. It probably has affected me more in more ways than one. But, just do it. Just go out and do it. What's the worst that's going to happen? I had a plan. I knew I needed to learn my stuff, and I had a plan to get there, and I have executed on that in a little bit of a different way. I was afraid to pull the trigger. Treat yourself the way you'd want to treat a client of yours, right? Make sure the idea isn't blatantly stupid. Make sure there's a road to get there, and find a way to do it. And don't get me wrong. I'm not saying this has been easy, right? This is every bit as hard as every single person on this podcast has said it is. You need to be willing to work a second job and study all this stuff in your free time and nights and weekends and that stuff. But, if you have a plan in place and it's a good one, like go for it. What's the worst that's going to happen? I've gotten a few, I have other job opportunities in the financial planning world that I could have fallen back on in between when I launched in November and now. And I haven't, and I'm not going to, but it's there, And the other piece of this is that I think as I have kind of reached this inflection point in my business, this eye of the hurricane, I've become acutely aware of how much other people in my life have shaped this journey that I'm on. That there's such a weird sort of contradiction that, the story of my firm that I'm 100% owner of, right, is less about just me than any of my work to date. I've stood on the shoulders of, and helped up by so many people. My wife, who's been, beyond supportive and believed in me more than I've believed in myself at times, right? My family has gotten me to this point and are still a great support system. Julian, my business coach, and his team, who have created this community and kind of believed in my potential. And I wouldn't have started a business without them. I wouldn't have even gone into a sales role without them. I'm in 2 awesome study groups in XYPN who are phenomenal. You, Alan, and Michael, and Maddie, and everyone at XYPN, my clients, like I said before, there is nothing that I could have foreseen, just how attached I feel to this first round of clients that I have, and how almost defensive I am of them, right? It's awesome. That having the ability for people to choose to work with you yourself, not a firm, not anybody else, but you, right? There's nothing in the world like that feeling. And there's nothing in the world that I wouldn't do for them as a result, and just, this idea that, starting your own business is all on you, and, it's your responsibility, and it's your thing, and you're going to go out and do it for your life. Like that's just crap. It's it's almost shocking to really, and you can hear I'm getting passionate about this. I'm just so appreciative of the opportunity that I've had and made for myself, certainly, but with the help of a whole lot of people along the way.
I love it. Well, congratulations on your early success and continued success. I can't wait to see how things go for you with the new rollout for the niche market, working with these engaged and newly married couples. So Bill, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the podcast today, for reaching out and letting me know you wanted to be on. We all appreciate you taking the time.
Hey, thanks so much, Alan. I appreciate it.
A big shout out to this month's sponsor, Right Capital. Sign up for a demo of Right Capital's innovative financial planning software at rightcapital.com and mention the XYPN Radio podcast to be eligible for 10% off retail pricing. Be sure to join our VIP community at xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to hang out with other XYPN Radio listeners, ask questions for future mailbag episodes with myself and Kitsis, and to finally find a community of like-minded financial advisors. Thanks so much for joining me today. We'll see you next time.
You're not alone, and you're not crazy. It's scary starting, building, and growing your own financial planning firm. And that's why we put together a free private community just for you, the Cutting Edge Financial Planner. Go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP or text XYPN Radio to 33344 and join a network of thousands ready to change the lives of Gen X and Gen Y clients.